Picture this. Someone invites you to a party on Friday night. You say yes, because that's what you're supposed to say. But for the next few days, there's this low-level dread sitting in the back of your mind. And when Friday finally comes, part of you is genuinely hoping something comes up. Any reason to cancel. And then, when the night is over and you walk back through your own front door, you feel it. That exhale. Like something inside you just unclenches. People will say something's wrong with you, that you're antisocial or boring or missing out on life. But here's what psychology actually says. There are people who genuinely, deeply love being home. Not because they're afraid of the world, but because something is happening inside their nervous systems that is fundamentally different from most people around them. After going through research from developmental psychology, personality science, and the study of optimal human experience, I want to share what's actually going on. Not the surface answer of, they're just introverts. Something much more specific. Because it turns out, the same traits that make someone love being home are the traits behind some of the most extraordinary thinking and creating that human beings do. Trait 1. You were born more switched on. This likely started before you even developed a personality. In the 1980s, developmental psychologist Jerome Kagan brought 4-month-old infants into his Harvard lab and exposed them to new stimuli. Balloons popping, unfamiliar smells, a mobile swinging in front of their faces. Some babies kicked, arched their backs, cried. Others barely flinched. Kagan called the reactive group high-reactive, and when he followed these children into adolescence, the high-reactive infants were far more likely to grow up preferring quiet environments, developing rich inner lives, and finding social overstimulation genuinely exhausting. Susan Cain documents this in Quiet. It's not weakness or fear. It's a nervous system that is more activated by stimulation. Full stop. So when someone who loves being home walks into a noisy party, their brain is processing more. More sounds, more faces, more social dynamics, more subtle cues. Where someone else might feel pleasantly buzzed, they're already at capacity within 20 minutes. Home isn't escape. It's the one place where the volume is turned down low enough to actually think. Trait 2. You process everything more deeply. Psychologist Elaine Aron spent decades studying what she called the highly sensitive person. Roughly 15 to 20% of the population whose nervous systems are wired to process information more thoroughly before acting. She describes a research subject named Kristen, a college student who as a child was sent for brain scans, hearing tests, and psychological evaluations because nobody could figure out what was wrong with her. Easily overwhelmed. Cried at music time when other kids pounded pots and pans. The final medical verdict: she had trouble screening out stimuli. Aron reframes this completely. That same trait is what makes someone immediately aware of the mood in a room the moment they walk in. What makes them notice a shift in someone's expression before anyone else. What makes one conversation leave an impression that lingers for days. An HSP who's been out in the world all day, at a mall, at work, even a pleasant dinner, comes home in a state of genuine cognitive overload. Their nervous system needs time to process everything it absorbed. Solitude isn't a preference, it's a requirement. And here's what I think most people miss. 30% of highly sensitive people are extroverts. So this isn't about being introverted. It's about the depth of your processing, not whether you like people. Trait 3. Your brain runs on a different reward system. Susan Cain points to research showing that introverts and extroverts process dopamine differently. Extroverts tend to have stronger reward sensitivity. Their brains respond intensely to the promise of external rewards, social approval, excitement, novelty. They're drawn to those things because the dopamine payoff is genuinely high. Home lovers tend to have a more muted dopamine response to external stimulation. This is why the pull of crowds and parties just isn't as strong. It's not that something's missing, it's a different fuel system. The implication is significant. These aren't people who lack desire for stimulation. They're people who are more easily satisfied by quieter, internal sources of it. A good book, a problem they're thinking through, one conversation with someone they actually trust. They don't need the party to feel alive. They were already alive before they got there. Trait 4. You have a stable core self. Brian Little, a personality psychologist at Cambridge, makes a distinction in me, myself, and us between what he calls onions and avocados. Onions, when you peel them back layer by layer, have no firm center. The self keeps shifting based on who's around and what the situation demands. Avocados, when you dig through to the center, have a pit, something hard and unchanging. People who love being home tend to be avocados. Their sense of self doesn't depend on social performance. They know who they are when nobody's watching, because they've spent a lot of time with nobody watching. Little also coined the term restorative niche, a place that allows someone to return to their natural state. He gives a personal example. As a lifelong introvert who spent years delivering highly extroverted lectures to military officers, he would arrive at lunch completely depleted. So instead of joining the officers' mess, he'd quietly slip away and walk alone along the Richelieu River, not because he loved boats, but because his nervous system needed to come down. Home is the ultimate restorative niche, the place you go to become yourself again, not a retreat from life, a return to the self you have to put aside a little every time you walk out the door. Trait 5. You can be alone without falling apart. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who spent his career studying optimal human experience, found something striking when he followed a group of talented young math students. Some kept developing their abilities, others dropped away. The cognitive gap between them was small. But there was one clear behavioral difference. The students who stayed engaged spent far more time alone, outside of school, just studying, thinking, practicing. The ones who fell away couldn't tolerate it. Not because they lacked ability, because they couldn't stand being alone with themselves. Csikszentmihalyi describes what happens to most people when nothing external structures their attention. The mind floods with what he calls psychic entropy, unprocessed worries, anxieties, random negative thoughts. Most people reach for their phone, the TV, anything. The quiet becomes unbearable. But some people have learned, often without realizing they learned it, to order their own consciousness from within. They can sit in a quiet room without needing to fill it, and this is a real psychological advantage. Because every significant creative achievement requires exactly this: sustained, undivided concentration. Steve Wozniak designed the first Apple computer during quiet late nights alone at his Hewlett-Packard cubicle. He described that period, in Susan Cain's words, as the biggest high ever. People who love being home have been practicing this for years. They just didn't know it was a skill. So when you add this up, the reactive nervous system, the depth of processing, the different dopamine wiring, the stable core self, the capacity for solitude, what you're looking at is a very specific psychological profile, not fear, not avoidance. These are people whose inner world is rich enough that the outside world doesn't always need to compensate. People built for depth over breadth. The world celebrates whoever is always out, always on, always engaged. But Csikszentmihalyi's research is direct. The quality of your life depends far more on the quality of your experience than the quantity of it. And some of the most important thinking in history happened in very quiet rooms. If you love being home, really love it, that's not a flaw to fix. That's a blueprint worth understanding. Thanks for being here. Let's keep learning together. Follow Quiet Arcadia for the next one.